Well, welcome to Disaster Relief, Cleanup and Recovery. This is the entry level or orientation class for new cleanup and recovery volunteers. The mission of Florida's Cleanup and Recovery Ministry is to provide hope to others while meeting the physical, spiritual needs of survivors after a disaster. And some of you may have been on a disaster call out before without being trained and having gone through this training, and that may be what prompted you to be a part of this training, is the initial feeling and emotion and opportunity to serve. And so we're glad that you are taking this opportunity to further your training and be part of this very important ministry, vital ministry, in providing hope, healing, and help to those who have been devastated by a disaster event. And so we just want to provide you the best training and equipping and preparation that we can in order to do that. In our training today, we're going to go through several stages or steps. So we're going to look at really why we're doing what we're doing, what disaster relief, particularly what cleanup and recovery is all about. We're going to look at some safety matters in general, and then at the end we'll look at some safety matters specifically related to our work. And then we're going to look at our three primary types of recovery work that we do in Florida disaster relief. So let's talk about some preliminary matters. First thing we need to think about is why we go. Florida Baptist Disaster Relief, really all of Southern Baptist Disaster Relief, is a ministry. We respond to people who are hurting. We respond to people who are in need with an opportunity to minister, basically to give that cup of cold water in Jesus' name. And so here are two verses that we really kind of hang our hat on as far as why we go. One is where Jesus said in Matthew chapter 25, when he was dividing the judgment over the nations, the sheep and the goats, and he said to the one group, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. And so Jesus bases judgment on how we serve and what we do for others in their time of need. The other verse that that drives us is Acts chapter 1 verse 8. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And so cleanup and recovery is a part of how we do our ministry as Florida Baptist. There are other areas of work, there are other areas of ministry within Florida Baptist Disaster Relief that meet emotional needs, spiritual needs, meet the physical need through food distribution and other opportunities. But we do our work through cleaning up and helping people to recover their homes. So one of the things that you need to always ask yourself and be aware of is know why you are there helping. Why are you here? Is it a sense of calling? Is it a sense of commitment? Maybe you've been through an event yourself, some kind of disaster event in your own life, and that's prompted you to want to help others. God has used that to stir in your heart. And so what got you involved in disaster ministry, in DR ministry? And so have an answer prepared. Two questions, and you will hear this in orientation, and you've heard this in orientation and other places. We always get those questions, two questions really that we always need to be prepared to answer. How much is this going to cost me? And obviously the answer is nothing, and we talk about, and that opens the door for us to have an opportunity to talk about the price that was paid for our sin and how God paid a very high price and calls us then to, the only repayment, as it were, is to minister to others, to love others in His name. The other question that we often get is, if it's not going to cost me, then why are you doing this? Why are you here? And we want to speak in generality about disaster relief. More specifically, that homeowner wants to know, why are you here? Why are you as an individual taking your time away from work, taking your time out of school, using your vacation, whatever it might be, to come and do this work for a total stranger? So at some point, you're going to have you'll be asked why you came, why you're doing it, and what does it mean to you. And so you need to be prepared and be ready to answer those questions. We need to remember some things also. God asked us to be obedient and serve Him by serving others. And so think of disaster relief in like a mission trip of sorts, even though we don't want it to be simply just a mission trip where we check off a list. But it's a mission trip, you're prepared, but you're not sure when it's going to happen. When we do mission trips, we know the date, we know how long we'll be there, we know kind of our time schedule and all those things when we're on the field. But think of disaster relief as a mission trip that you constantly have to be prepared for. God asks you to be obedient and serve Him by serving others, and so we need to always be prepared. We have an idea about what we're going to be doing, but that may change. So flexibility and availability is our key approach to responding to a disaster. So we want to be flexible, we want to be available, because what we train for and how we think an event might look like when we show up to do the work, it may be completely different. Or we may be doing something different that we had not initially prepared for. And so needs change, how we've been asked to serve may change. We may be asked to do some things outside our comfort zone, and that's okay. We want to be flexible. We want to trust others that we're working with and allow God to do the work in us and through us. We also need to remember that there are direct, indirect, and hidden victims. Direct victims are obviously those that have been affected, those that have been impacted directly, that you'll be working with, you'll be talking with, you'll be sharing with. Indirect victims may be neighbors that weren't affected, neighbors that have some guilt because their home was not damaged or hurt in any way, and their neighbors were. And so there'll be some indirect victims. There'll also be some hidden victims. And so sometimes the task may meet the needs of a hidden victim, one that or survivor, one that you did not, you don't have the opportunity to even see. It might be a family member, it might be a friend of the homeowner that you serve with, and even though you don't see them, they are impacted by the fact that someone came to help their mother, their grandmother, their parents, their brother, their sister, or their close friend. And so remember, we're working on God's agenda. God has asked us to serve, and remember that God knew where we were and knew what we were doing before He asked us and called us to leave home, leave our responsibilities, and to serve Christ. And so we need to be obedient. Completing jobs is not the priority in what we do. We want to do the work. Obviously, we have to, at some point, complete the work on someone's home to get them back to a place where they can start rebuilding. But that's not our priority. Our priority is sharing Christ's love to others and with others, and allowing them to see the hands and feet of Jesus through us. And so that's our priority. It comes about not just in simply sitting down and talking to someone. It comes about in how we carry out the work, how we work together as a team, how we display and demonstrate our character in very difficult circumstances when we're outside of our comfort zone, and how that Christ-like spirit is carried out and conducted. And that is our witness, what we say, but then also in how we conduct ourselves. And so we need to remember that God is using us and working through us in these events. Another preliminary matter we need to think about is how we deal with information. We want to be well informed, and we may be informed about many things related to a disaster, but we have to be responsible and responsive in a careful and supportive manner. That means we must avoid spreading misinformation. An example of that may be someone asks us, how can I get help? And our proper response is to point them to your unit leader, to your blue hat, or to give them contact information for the command center, in regards to how they can get help for their home, how they can get help from the municipalities, how they can get help from FEMA. The command center and the incident commander will have that kind of information, and that's not information for us to share and to dispense, because oftentimes it changes, and we never want to be part of misinformation. We also want to avoid advising the homeowner as it relates to their insurance and making promises to them. We never make promises. We never make promises about what we'll do, when we'll be able to be there. We instruct our assessors who assess the property initially, do not make promises about when teams will come and what they will be able to do. And so we should not make those promises either. We also should not attempt to represent and remind people that we do not represent government agencies, so we can't give information or make promises about FEMA, about insurance, about what the city or the county or the state is doing. We don't represent them, so we don't know those things. Also, we want to avoid dealing or talking to homeowners and advising them how to deal with their insurance companies. You may be a master electrician, a master plumber, or a master carpenter, but when it comes to those kind of things, we leave that up to their insurance provider. We leave that up to their contractors when they get back in their home in those issues. We just simply are there to represent Christ, to be a good witness for Him, and to do the work that we need to do. And so we want to be very careful about rumors, spreading misinformation, and simply do what we've been called to do and share what we do know, and that is that God loves them and what we can do for them. Let's talk about some safety matters. We're going to talk about some safety matters in general for you personally, and then in a little bit later we're going to come back and look at some additional safety matters that are work specific. So we want to be aware of some warning signs. And the first thing that I would caution you on when thinking about safety and some warning signs is your own personal feelings and approach to what you're doing. There's no reason for you to be intimidated by what others do as it relates to you and your strength and your usefulness. Everybody has a different skill set. Everybody has a different experience level, years of experience and different background, and we bring all of that together. And so none of us should feel intimidated because others can do things that we may not can do, and we feel pressured or we feel stressed into performing above our experience level, our skill level, our health level when it comes to the work that we're doing. And so your blue hat, your team leader, will direct you in that, and so we want to be aware of warning signs for ourselves in that regard. Rest when you can. Some people can work longer and some can't, and that's okay, because no one is going to look at you and look at me and say, well, they just took a break 10 minutes ago. Well, heat is a factor, sun exposure is a factor, extreme cold can be a factor, and so when the blue hat determines that we need a break, then everybody takes a break. Because he may not necessarily be looking out for you, he may be looking out for someone else on the team, and determines, okay, this person's not going to stop working, let's just call a break, and then everyone can take a break. And so make sure you take your breaks when needed, and it may be necessary to call a break so that the entire team will break together. And it's also a good time for some fellowship and just some team building experience in that. So be aware of some warning signs with your own health, with your own mental strength and your own spiritual strength as well. Some helpful hints as far as your personal care and safety when you are on a call out, because call outs extend 5. You should be prepared to stay 5 to 7 days. Some people even may stay longer, but that's our suggested time period. And so it's important that you maintain your normal health routine while you're on a call out. So that means take medications as prescribed by your physician. You may want to consider having backup medications, take extra prescriptions just in case. You could lose them, you could actually maybe end up staying longer than anticipated and run out, and if an area was hit hard enough, you may not be able to find a pharmacy that can fill your prescription. So you may want to consider taking extra of your prescribed medications with you. Again, work within your strength and your limitations. Your physical strength, your own strength and health, your emotional strength, the stress management, and that's certainly a factor because oftentimes a response event can be a very emotional and trying time. It works on our emotions because we see a lot of hurt. We talk to people who are going through perhaps one of the worst experiences in their entire life. And so dealing with and helping others emotionally. Also your mental strength, your knowledge and your skills. Be well prepared mentally and emotionally and physically, but most of all, be prepared spiritually. Be spiritually prepared because, again, of the workload and the emotional baggage or the emotional toll and the mental toll that it takes, we need to be spiritually prepared and spiritually in tune. And so if there are other items of personal care that you need, bring those along as well. Whatever those items might be, over-the-counter medications, anything for your comfort and for your well-being during the time that you're on a call out. You need to eat regularly. You will need to increase your water intake according to the heat and the workload. Dehydration comes very quickly in a call-out event, especially. Remember, hurricane season is during the hottest part of the year for us in Florida, and so you want to be well hydrated and stay healthy during the time when you're in a call-out. Again, take along your personal health items, which you find helpful for you at home and your comfort. You will be sleeping in close quarters, and so if snoring is an issue, you might even want to consider bringing earplugs or something to drown out the snoring because we will sleep in close quarters. And so your well-being and your health is an important part of functioning as a team member for your cleanup and recovery unit. And we want all of our cleanup and recovery members to be healthy and to be strong and to be able to complete the work while they're there. Use hand sanitizer before eating. Wash your hands thoroughly. All of your cleanup and recovery units should have a sufficient amount of hand sanitizer. You may want to bring your own soap and water and washing your hands appropriately. Remember, you're going to be, and we'll talk about this, but you're going to be dealing with some pretty nasty stuff, especially in flood situations. So you want to make sure that you're staying clean and you're staying hygienic and staying sanitized, especially when you're eating and while you're out on the job site. So let's talk about cleanup activities then. What does cleanup and recovery, some of the things that we actually do. Again, we want to be reminded flexibility is key in the assignment. We need to be ready to make adjustments. We have an idea about what we think the situation may be before we leave home as we start thinking about it and we start preparing. But that may not necessarily be what we find when we get on site. So be ready to make adjustments and prepare for some flexibility. The blue hat on your team, the unit leader, is responsible for determining what we will do on each job site. So he is the one who will give direction, and so we need to be prepared to take direction from him and be willing to do what's asked. Now obviously he should and most likely will assign those job responsibilities and determine how we're going to approach the job in consultation with the rest of his team. and you have an opportunity to speak into that. But once those plans have been established and how we're going to approach the work, it's important to recognize that the Blue Hat leader is responsible and is in charge. And it's important to recognize that, again, that our jobs will change, and we are representing Christ. First and foremost, that is our primary job, is to be a witness for the Lord Jesus. And that's reflected, again, in not just what we say, but in how we say it, what we say, and what we do. So a bad attitude doesn't really come across as a good witness. It does not represent the Lord Jesus very well. So we want to have a good attitude and a good working relationship with our team so that the homeowner can see the bonds that we have in Christ together. So if you're assigned a job that you're unable to do and you're uncomfortable with, tell your Blue Hat that. And that's okay. And they can shift you around, they can do some things differently and assign you something that you're more comfortable with. But he needs to know that, and he needs to be aware of that and prepared for that. One thing that we also need to remember that people don't think about is that disasters also affect animals and the behavior of animals. Hurricanes, floods, tornadoes can cause wildlife to be disrupted. Even domesticated animals can be disrupted. And so oftentimes wildlife may seek shelter within homes where their homes have been disrupted, trees have been downed, floods have happened and driven them out of their homes. They may seek shelter in the homes that we're about to go into. So stay alert. We don't reach into dark places and where we cannot see that could be the potential where snakes or other things may have taken up residence. So we want to be aware and want to be alert to that. We want to be cautious of dogs and cats that are wandering or approaching the area where we're working. Rabies could have come in contact with wild animals that are rabid, and so we want to be alert. We want to be careful of that. Snakes and alligators can be in spaces that we might not expect. Again, that's why we don't reach into small spaces or reach into spaces we cannot see. The other thing is that domesticated animals, even though they may be very delicate, they may be the homeowner may assure us that they are very friendly and never bothered anybody. They've never been around. They've never been through this event. They may have never been around chainsaws and all of the activity that's going on. And so that very lovely little household pet could turn into Cujo very quickly with all of the activity. And so we just want to be cautious and careful, make sure that we're aware. Also, we want to look for the poison vines, poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. Be familiar with those because you may have an allergy to those that you might not even be aware of. And so learn what they look like, especially in cutting timber. When you cut through those vines, it sprays the juices of those vines, and so we want to be very aware of those and pay attention to those. So just know that animal and nature has been affected as well, and that you will interact with those possibly. Disasters also leave hazardous material. Two things that we stress that are vitally important prior to you being involved in cleanup and recovery activities is that you have up-to-date tetanus and you have up-to-date hepatitis shots. When working with disaster relief, doctors say that we need a tetanus every 5 years, more than the normal 10 years. Hepatitis B is the primary one that we need to focus on, and it comes in a series of 3 shots spread out over a course of several months. Rusty nails, rusty tin, other things that have come in contact with polluted water carry all kinds of bacteria and are potentially deadly, and so we need to make sure that we have up-to-date tetanus and up-to-date hepatitis shots, particularly those two. Any other shots or any other kind of treatments beforehand are not necessarily, except for your own personal health, but as a general rule. But those two are specifically those that we want you to have. So what do, when we look at cleanup and recovery, a cleanup unit and the work that we do in cleanup and recovery generally covers these four areas, or 5 areas, 4 primarily for us in Florida. One is obviously chainsaw. That's the one that most people are aware of. When there's a disaster event, chainsaws come out, and everyone goes through their garage and finds Grandpa's old chainsaw and starts cutting trees. But we do chainsaw work, which includes removal of that debris. When we cut up trees, we don't leave them. We carry it to whatever location we've been instructed to. Generally, it's along the roadside where it can be picked up by debris haulers. Debris removal also relates to flood response, where we'll be taking out drywall or wallboard, flooring, carpet, hardwood, linoleum, other floor coverings, furniture, appliances, other household items that will also generally be taken to the roadside where debris haulers can take that out. Occasionally, that may be necessary to put it in a dumpster. Even at times, we've had to put it in trash bags. But then temporary roof repair, we call this blue roofs. You see sometimes people refer to it as blue roofs. Sometimes the tarps are gray, so it's technically not always blue roofs, but it is exactly what it says. It's temporary. It's not meant to be permanent, but we still want to get a home in a situation where it is dry and can be dry until it can have a roof on it. So we want to do a good job of doing that, and we'll look at that in a moment. And then rebuild. Rebuild is after all of the response and the relief has taken place, and then teams can come in and do rebuild. There are multiple people that do rebuild. Disaster relief has rebuild teams. In Florida, we don't do as much rebuild, but there are other states that do quite a bit of rebuild. There are other ministry organizations, nonprofits that do rebuild and go back in and put back the drywall, put back in floor covering possibly, and other things and put on roofs and other things that need to get that homeowner. Again, our goal is to get the homeowner from a house that's been impacted by the event to helping them get back into that home and some sense of normalcy about their life. The Blue Hat is going to have a work order that an assessment team has gone on and looked at that home and determined what needs to be done. In some cases, especially if it's a wind event with a lot of chainsaw work, you may do chainsaw work and do temporary roofing. The water may have come into the house, and so there may even be some flood recovery from that with water that's come down instead of coming up from the bottom. So the work order will be filled out by an assessment team and given to your unit, and your Blue Hat then will look at that and look at the capabilities of your team and determine if you can do that, and if you do, then you begin the work on that home. This is what a cleanup and recovery unit looks like. This is a smaller trailer, and smaller trailers are preferred actually because of the ease in getting them into tight places and on a disaster site. We generally don't like to have trailers over 14 or 16 foot at the max, not because necessarily of the pulling them and moving them about. But once we get into a disaster site, backing them in and parking them and putting them on the street sometimes can be difficult. And so trailers over 16 feet then begin to be a problem for us. Some things to remember when building your trailer: if you are a church or an association and you're looking at putting together a cleanup and recovery unit and putting together a work trailer with equipment, some things that you need to consider. You need to consider the trucks that you will have available to pull that trailer. The larger the trailer, the larger the truck has to be, and so that limits the number of possibilities and also the drivers of those vehicles as well. And we really prefer trailers over box trucks because, again, the cost of purchasing those, the cost of maintenance is a lot more if you have a box truck. The flexibility in drivers. Not everyone can drive that big box truck. Flexibility in towing. You may have more people that could tow a 12 or 14 or 16 foot trailer with a pickup than you may only have a couple of people who could drive a box truck. And so when building your trailer, consider your options in terms of moving your equipment about. The other thing is that if you build a cleanup and recovery unit as a church or an association, either one, you need to have a memorandum of understanding, what we call an MOU, with Florida Baptist Disaster Relief or the Florida Baptist Convention before you can put logos on that trailer and identify yourself as a Florida Baptist Convention Disaster Relief unit. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Part of it's legal, part of it's to protect the integrity of our ministry from people who just put our logos, and we've had some issues and problems in the past, and people using our logo, and homeowners have been charged, and homeowners have been adversely affected, and so we want to just make sure. And so fill out the MOU. You will get your logos to put on your trailer. You will also get a registration number that identifies your unit, whether it's a church or an association unit, and so that we can track you, and so that we know who is part of your unit, and we can identify you that way. And not all trailers are set up alike, but should have some same basic equipment. And this is one trailer that's owned by an individual church. And all of the equipment trailers are owned by individual churches or associations. The Florida Baptist Convention has one cleanup and recovery unit that is a convention unit, but all of the others are owned and operated by churches or association. The material that's used and stored in there is done how your team wants to best use the space in your trailer. And you can outfit your trailer however you want to, and how you want to situate your equipment inside that trailer for working inside that trailer. Most of our cleanup and recovery trailers and units in Florida are outfitted for all of our ministries. Occasionally you will see teams that are specifically for chainsaw only, and their trailer is entirely a chainsaw trailer, or they're set up to do flood, or they're set up to do temporary roofing. Typically in Florida, we encourage all of our cleanup and recovery units to be prepared to do all three because of the nature of hurricanes and the nature of what we end up doing when we have an event in Florida. And so we try to encourage trailers to be outfitted, or at least have the potential to swap out equipment that can handle all three, because then you're not limited on your response event. If you're only a chainsaw unit and we need flood teams, then that's going to limit your ability to respond. So we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to minister, and we need everyone to be a part in responding. This is an example, again, of using the storage space in a way that the team has decided with chainsaws and yard tools and other tools. So it's important that the trailer floor, the walkway through the trailer, be open and uncluttered and easy to move about in your trailer. The last thing you want to do is come home and say, I got injured walking through the trailer. And so you want to make sure that you have an uncluttered workspace, that you have space for all of your equipment to go. It also protects your equipment in travel if you have a dedicated space to it, and then you don't open the door on your trailer and all of your saws are broken because they weren't secured or whatever. And so you also want to think about the protection of your equipment. Unfortunately, we have had trailers that have been broken into. We have had equipment that's been stolen, even on a work site while someone was working in the house. No one was paying attention, watching the trailer. Then equipment walked away. And so, having someone as an equipment, a tool man, a trailer man or woman to stand there and to kind of help guard and give out water and do things, and those jobs can rotate, but making sure that you keep the general maintenance and protection of your equipment in mind. So let's talk about then chainsaws. We're going to look at just some basic operation. We do have advanced classes on chainsaw, flooding, and temporary roofing, as well as assessment. This is just some basic chainsaw operations, some awareness of when chainsaws are being used in an area, not necessarily how to use a chainsaw. Again, that's covered in an advanced class. But some of the things, some very basics of understanding is, first of all, be safe. That is our primary objective and primary goal. Obviously, as I said, our priority is sharing the gospel. Our priority is being witnesses for the Lord Jesus. Our number one core value is safety. We can't be good witnesses if we're not safe. If we're injured, we can't witness to anyone. We can't, perform the work that we need to. So, chainsaw operators need to be trained before they respond to a call out. And there's a difference between learning to run a saw and being trained to use a saw in a disaster situation. Using a saw in our context is not cutting firewood. Using a saw in our context is not trimming limbs. Using a saw in our context is what's called storm saw cutting. We have pressures and tensions and stresses that we have to consider. We have trees that are piled on top of trees, and so there's a lot more danger involved. There's a lot more training that needs to be involved, a lot more safety that has to be considered. And so we ask that all of our units only allow trained operators, either through training that you've provided or that they've received or that we've provided for them, gone through our chainsaw class, to operate their saws. One way to do that is use some community projects. There are always people in your community that need some assistance, and your team can do that and use your equipment and train some new chainsaw operators. Take some time to do that. We will do that for you as well as state leaders for your cleanup and recovery unit if that's needed. In a situation where someone has to be trained on a call out, we ask that a very experienced operator work with that volunteer, and that's as a last resort. And we want to make sure that if there comes a need where you need to train on the site an operator, that you do that with some expediency. So be safe, be aware. Our goal is to avoid causing more damage. A house has already been damaged enough, and so we want to make sure that people who are operating saws and who are making decisions have some experience in tree felling and what's going to happen when trees are cut and what's going to happen with the stresses and the tensions, so that we don't create more of a problem for the homeowner by causing more damage. And we want to limit the work to what the homeowner asks. And that will happen in the assessment, when the assessor talks to the homeowner, but it also will happen when we talk to the homeowner as a unit, when we come to discuss the work that they've said, and that's what we do. We limit our work to what they've asked. So we see a tree that's leaning out there and we think it ought to come down, and we go and cut it, and then the homeowner is very upset because that's not what they asked. Then we want to make sure, now we might talk to them and help them understand why a tree might need to be felled, but if they don't want it to come down, then that's their call. We want to make sure that we limit the work to what the homeowner has asked us to do. When working near a chainsaw, there's several things that I want to encourage you in terms of safety. One is stay alert. Use common sense while operating a chainsaw or or you are around a chainsaw. And so the proper technique for working with or around a chainsaw is, first and foremost, be alert. Stay alert. Everyone watches out for the operator, and everyone watches out for each other. Again, this is different than you going out in your pasture or going out somewhere and dropping a single tree and cutting it up for firewood. There are all kind of things that are happening around you. Other people are cutting in other areas. People are dragging brush. There's equipment that's moving debris in and out. And so we want to use common sense and stay alert and be aware of our surroundings. Keep your work area clean. That means cut a little bit, step back, let the brush pullers pull that debris, or if you are the brush puller, person helping an operator, then when he stops that saw and steps back, help him to get that work area uncluttered. Cluttered means debris hazard and trip hazards for that saw operator, and it only takes one misstep in a limb or a pile of limbs that should have been moved. Only chainsaw operators should be in the immediate work area. You should stay a sufficient distance apart, at least 6 foot, preferably even further than that, but at least 6 feet away from the operator, and certainly keep children and animals and bystanders, others, away from the saw operator. Again, we don't want anyone in that area, so that the likelihood of injury is lessened. Stay safe, think safety, always be thinking and watching and be alert. This is not a time when you can, if you're responding or if you are responsible for being the partner to a saw operator, or you are the saw operator, it's not a time to daydream. It's not a time to check your phone and those kind of things. It's time to pay attention, because it is a dangerous exercise. We practice the buddy system. As I said, you may be the person watching and helping an operator, and you may be that person in that pair or that group, and so we watch out for each other, and two people should not be operating the saw, and this is one of the things that we teach in our chainsaw class. Two people should not be operating a saw on the same tree. That does not count as the buddy system. Because if I'm the operator, my primary focus and all of my attention is on the saw and on what I'm cutting and exactly what is around in that scope of vision. I need somebody to watch what's happening around me. That other saw operator is the same way, and so he's not watching my back. He's watching what's in front of him. So two saw operators don't count as a buddy system. We can't hear each other, and so one of those persons in the pair needs to have someone who's nearby, who's pulling brush, who's helping them keep their workspace uncluttered, who can watch for hazards, and who can give them a shout if necessary. And so that provides us a safe working environment with that operator. Here's some of the safety equipment that we require. I started to say recommend, but recommend's not the word that I want to use. Require is the word that we want to use. We want you to wear safety equipment and clothing that is appropriate to the task. We prefer you to wear a hard hat, preferably the integrated, but you can wear a hard hat and goggles, but preferably you would have an integrated hat with face shield that also has ear protection built in. That way you're not forgetting one of the pieces, because each one of those is important. A large percentage of the deaths that happen with chainsaw uses come from not the sawyer being cut, but the operator being hit from debris above, what we call widowmakers. And especially in our context cutting, where you have a lot of limbs that are left hanging, debris that's broken, but then when you start to cut on a tree, it falls. And so covering your head is vitally important. A face shield is important because that keeps dust, dirt, debris, also limbs that might break loose under tension or stress, spring poles or other things, and that keeps you from being hit in the face with those limbs. Hearing protection, a chainsaw, a commercial chainsaw, runs at almost, not quite, but almost at 100 decibels. And if you run that and you're in fairly close proximity to that saw motor that's running at that high decibel level, if you do that over any period of time, it's going to destroy your hearing. And so you want to make sure that you've got adequate ear protection, either ear plugs or the ear muffs that are built into your helmet. Eye protection means safety glasses or goggles. The face shield on an integrated helmet is a wire mesh or a plastic mesh. It is not a protective. It will not protect you against a projectile that may be thrown back and injure you and hit you in the eye. So along with your shield, you also want eye protection, safety glasses that you can use. You can use clear ones, or you can use a sunglass style that can deflect some of the sun, but it still needs to be eye protection. A dust mask, if you're prone to need that. Gloves, work gloves are recommended. Running a saw does create blisters, but it also does give you a little bit of protection in your hands. They do actually make saw gloves that do have some of the ballistic fiber in the back of the hand, so if you were to bump the back of your hand with the saw, then you've got some protection there. But good pair of work gloves, good work boots, sturdy boots, not tennis shoes, not hiking boots, but good sturdy work boots are recommended, not only for chainsaw users, but also for those of you who might be pulling debris and pulling brush just because of the unsteadiness of the ground, stepping on limbs. You want something that's going to be tight around your ankles. It's going to keep your ankles secure. It's got a good sole to give you good footing so that you don't slip. And even if you think you need those, then steel-toed caps or composite caps. Just remember that composite caps will not stop a chainsaw. And then chaps. We do not want to see you running a chainsaw, operating a chainsaw without chaps. The chain that is running on that chainsaw, a commercial chainsaw, travels 8 feet per second. If that saw were to hit any part of your body that is unprotected, it can run through those cutters 220 times a second. And just imagine that if it hits you in the leg, where the majority of chainsaw injuries do happen, then you're going to be in trouble. And so we want to make sure that you have something to protect your leg. The chain is moving, and it can do a lot of damage before it stops, before you take your hand off of the trigger. And so this is the list of, and also a whistle. The whistle is at a different decibel level and a different tone than a chainsaw. You can also whistle with your mouth. You can have a whistle. Some buddies, partners also use a stick to tap a saw operator. Just know what your buddy is going to use, so that if they need to stop you, then they can do that. Sometimes just yelling is not sufficient, but that high pitch of a whistle oftentimes is more effective in getting an operator's attention. Safety gear must be worn when you are operating the saw. We also recommend safety equipment when you are the partner to an operator. If you are close, if you're helping pull debris, you need gloves, you need a helmet, you need a face shield. And if there's enough chaps and you're comfortable with chaps, wearing them, even doing that, then you can do that. But you need to wear safety equipment and safety gear as well, because cutting storm debris is dangerous. Clearing out loose debris, ensuring good footing at all times are important, even if you're simply pulling debris. And so you want to protect yourself as well. Even if you're not the operator, you need to have appropriate safety gear. You want to avoid fatigue. Do not work on ladders, scaffolds, operating machinery, especially operating chainsaw, if you're tired, if you're fatigued, especially if you've been taking medicines that may cause drowsiness. I have a kind of a mantra that I use. When fatigue sets in, the saw shuts off. When I make my first mistake, and I know that it's a mistake that's related to simply being tired or fatigued, then I turn my saw off, because then I'm liable to make more mistakes. And so taking breaks is important. If you run through and continue to push and get exhausted, then you're asking for trouble. Fatigue is dangerous to you, but it's also dangerous to those who are around you as well. And so take time to take breaks. Don't get fatigued, but when you get to that point when you know that you've had enough, then it's time to turn your saw off. Be aware of where other volunteers are and be concerned for their safety before you throw debris, before using your equipment, before cutting. If you're cutting on one side of a tree and you're not aware that there are other people on the other side, and in cutting that tree you release tension or you release stresses, then you may harm someone who is in the area that you are not even aware of. So be aware of where others are. Your partner should help you with that, and don't assume that other volunteers are going to let you know where they are. Take responsibility for knowing where they are. So be careful, especially when there are more than 2 operators working in a general area on different trees, and know what's happening around you.
Hi, I'm Jen Haar.
And I'm Louis Casarella.
We wanted to talk to you about why it's so important that you wear cut-retardant chaps with Steel's Avertic Pro Protection fabric from Angtex when operating your chainsaw.
Personal protective equipment is something that you and your family use every day. Whether it's a helmet when you're riding your bike or motorcycle, gear for your kids when they're playing sports, even the seatbelts in your car.
And it makes just as much sense, and it's just as important to wear personal protective items when you're operating your power tools as well, like your gasoline-powered chainsaw.
In particular, chaps are extremely important because they're designed to quickly stop the moving chain on your gasoline-powered chainsaw if it were to accidentally come in contact with your leg.
Without chaps, that could be a very serious accident, and at worst, even fatal. As you can see in this example, our MS-271 is cutting a hard piece of wood, and you can see it cuts the wood very quickly. Just imagine how damaging it could be if that were your leg, and the chain on the saw, running at full speed, accidentally came into contact with your leg. We'll show you how a pair of steel protective chaps with Avertic Pro fibers can reduce the chances of you becoming seriously injured by a moving chain on your saw if it were to come into contact with your chap. We've wrapped our new pair of chaps on this log. With our MS-271 running at full speed, Louis is going to make contact with our chaps. As you can see, the chain on the saw stopped almost instantly. The Avertic Pro fibers in the chaps, when exposed to the chain cutting through the outer layer, have clogged up the cutting system of the chainsaw and stopped the rotating chain. So, how did our log fare in this demonstration? The chainsaw never broke through the inner layer of the chaps. Now, it's important to understand that no one can guarantee that an injury will not occur or will be less severe because an operator wears chaps. The actual degree of protection afforded will vary with the speed of the chain, the time and angle of contact, power, and torque of the saw, and similar factors. In this case, the operator would have been better off, but they are not intended to substitute good safety procedures.
A couple of important points about your chaps. Your instructions that come with your chaps will give you instructions on washing and drying them. Chaps will perform their best when washed prior to their first use. And in the event that your chainsaw comes in contact with your chaps and cuts into the evertic fabric layer, the chaps should be replaced immediately as they have lost their protective effectiveness. But still, as you can see, a new pair is a small price to pay for your safety.
So if you use a chainsaw, make sure that you wear your chaps and other personal protective equipment that is recommended in your instruction manual that came with your saw.
Thanks for watching.
And please, stay safe.
Okay, let's talk about flood recovery. Obviously, we want to be careful when we approach any standing water, driving through it, especially high water or moving water. Typically, we don't work on homes until water has receded. Occasionally, but it still may be wet and around in an area, but not standing water. We try to avoid that, and so we want to make sure that we are not working where it's unsafe around there. But some of the things when we think about flood recovery that we need to consider is checking for gas fumes and making sure that we open all the windows in a house that the house can be ventilated. Get some air in and get some of those trapped up odors, get them out. We need to know if the electrical power is on or off. In a flood situation, if there has been no wind, then typically the power is not going to be affected. And about over 50% of the time, power is still on. So we need to be aware of that. We need to know if it is. If the homeowner is present, and we typically like for them to be, especially in a flood situation, because they can tell us if there's something that they want to try to save. We can talk to them about that. Your blue hat can talk to them about the dangers of trying to keep material that has been affected by black water, biologically intrusive water. And so, but there may be some things. Discuss with the homeowner what you're going to be doing. The assessor may have talked to them about that. It may not have fully registered, but you can walk them through that and talk to them about what you're going to do, and make sure that you're both in agreement about what needs to be done. Talk to them about the recovery process and what that will look like. When you get finished, then what will have to happen next, as far as someone coming in and them talking to their insurance or talking to a contractor. Again, we're not giving advice. We're just simply telling them here are the steps that will need to happen once we finish. And so you can include the homeowner and help them deal with the loss of their possessions and the loss of their home, particularly giving them an opportunity or giving you an opportunity and an open door then to minister to them, to provide comfort in that situation. Some things that flood recovery work may include water and mud removal. As I said, most of the time we like for water to have receded, but if we're talking about basements and crawl spaces and those kind of things, sometimes we may have to pump water. In some places, mud literally has to be removed, where there have been mudslides and in those places where there's hills around, and mud has to be removed by buckets and taken out. Wallboard, whether it's sheetrock or some other kind of wallboard, has to be removed at least 12 inches above the flood line. And again, that will be determined as you look at where the water line is, how high the water soaked up behind the wallboard. Insulation behind the wall will take that water and it will draw it up. And you may have a water line at one point, but you may have water that has soaked up through the insulation behind the wallboard. You'll need to remove furniture and appliances. You'll need to help the homeowner understand that there's not a lot that can be done in a cleaning process to remove all of the bacteria and all of the harmful elements that are in that fabric and foam and particle board that has soaked up all of that dirty water, particularly if it has sat for several days before you get there to do the job. and black mold has already begun to infiltrate their furniture, then they're not going to be able to save that. Appliance removal is done very very cautiously. Do not open refrigerators and freezers and things that would hold water. Those simply need to be taped, closed, and those need to be taken to the street. Carpet is removed. Sometimes even hardwood floors need to be removed. Anything that allows, if you have a subfloor that's wood, then whatever floor covering is down needs to be removed so that subfloor can be got to. If the floor covering is on cement, then some floor coverings may not have to be removed, but carpet, especially wood and hardwood, because that's a biological, and the potential for that black mold to grow is prevalent. We pressure wash then the walls and the floors, and then we use a product called Shockwave. Bleach is done as a very last resort. Shockwave is an enzyme applicant, and it's used in hospitals, surgery suites. It is very effective against black molds and other viruses, and so Shockwave is what we use, and it's not harmful. Like bleach, it's not harmful to the economy or to the environment. It's not harmful to the person, to you, the operator, as well. And so that's what we prefer to use, and it's done in simply a spray formula. These are some pictures of some flooded situations. You see the black mold that's growing up the walls. You see the height of that. You see the crawl space. You see where the flooring has had to have been taken up. And when mold is present, you want to wear respirators. You want to wear your mask, your N95 mask. Make sure you have eye protection, skin protection before you use your Shockwave and your chemicals. Mold growing in crawl spaces needs to be gotten to as well, because it will eventually come through the flooring and come into the home, and so even under the house we have to take care of those things. And so we take out everything, leave the house clean, and so that we can then spray it with the Shockwave and kill the black mold. Temporary roof repair is exactly what it says. It's temporary. And so when you're starting to do temporary roofing, you want to make sure that you have a stable structure to support you. If you're going to be walking around on the roof, know and be aware of holes or broken decking or unstable roof situations. You sweep off and blow off all of the particles, any sharp objects, anything that might damage the tarp that you're going to put down, because again, you're leaving a temporary roof until they can find a roofer to come in and repair that roof or put a new roof on. And so it needs to be something that can stay, and it can keep water out of the house. You're trying to keep that house dry until they can come in. And we do that with tarps. You can also do it with single tab shingles. If it's just a small spot and you can put some shingles down, use some roofing tar or what we call peel and stick. Again, it's temporary, but it's effective, and so whatever the blue hat determines is the extent of what you need to do, and you need to be prepared to use each of those materials. When we're temporary roofing, we put a temporary roof on, or we temporarily patch when shingles are blown off, leaving the decking exposed, leaving the tar paper and the decking exposed. When there's structural damage to a roof, either that roof has been affected by the wind itself, or a tree has fallen over or into or onto that roof and punctured or penetrated from the tree and debris. The main focus again is to dry in the roof, to get that roof dried in, and to make sure that the homeowner is not going to continue to experience rain coming in through that roof. And so we use, as I said, tarping material that's either blue or a gray. Preferably we use that is fiber, has fiber in it, and it is of a mill thickness that's going to last through the heat and through the other elements that may affect it. We want to be cautious when we're on a roof. If you feel more comfortable using tie-offs and harnesses, then by all means do that. If you need to use toe boards on a roof that has a steep pitch to it, over 512, then you may need to do that. Before you walk on a roof, make sure that you know where the danger spots are. And you may need to apply decking. You may need to put down some additional decking on a roof because the holes are large enough, the damage is large enough that a tarp will simply sag. If you need to deck that roof or you need to span that hole, that damage, with some other kind of structural integrity, then you can do that so that you can provide a good place for that tarp to be affixed to the roof. This is what a finished roof looks like, a sealed and tightly secured cover. You want to roll your furring strips under on all of your edges, and then you want to run your furring strips with the peak, so that the rain doesn't catch and pool. You want to make sure that you tape any overlaps. If you have overlapping, if you'll notice near the peak of the picture on the left, there's a seam there, and so under that you want to nail that down, and then when you come over that, then you seal that overlap, and then put your furring strips down that. Notice your valleys have furring strips all the way down, and there's a rolled furring strip under that tarp. So that tarp, you take it and roll it like the picture on the right, and then you tack it down either using nails or screws when you do that, and then you've got a tight roof and a sealed roof. So let's talk about some disaster hazard safety considerations, specifically not just health and safety in general to yourself, but to the work that you're actually going to be doing. Crew safety is the primary concern in assessing your situation and making decisions. So again, know your limitations. There have been a lot of well-intentioned volunteers that have been injured during disaster relief operations because they did not pay attention to their own limitations. Their own physical limitations, their own mental limitations, and even maybe their own emotional and spiritual limitations. So again, monitor yourself. Safety is always the number one concern on a disaster relief call-out. So always err on the side of caution. Use common sense, monitor yourself, but also be looking out for your other team members. Pay attention to them, be aware of them. Do you see some danger signs or some warning signs in someone else that maybe they're not paying attention to, and you need to step in and help them and assist them? Crew safety, looking out for one another, working as a team is essential. Some disaster considerations, being especially cautious of slippery floors, especially when we're doing flood recovery. You pull up carpet that's been wet and it's still wet, guess what? You're going to leave a cement floor that's slippery and wet. If you're doing pressure washing, you're going to leave a wet floor. You take out sinks and countertops and cabinets and bathrooms, and somebody didn't turn the water off, or there's water in the lines, you're going to leave a slippery floor. Be aware of that. Be especially alert to wet areas in that regard. Live electrical wiring. Know if the power is on or off. Make sure that the gas is off. Look for propane tanks. Look for gas lines and make sure that your gas is off. Use common sense when shutting off power. Be sure that you're standing in a dry spot, you're not wet. Storm damage may have compromised electrical wiring, so you want to be aware of that and be alert to that. Again, the assessment team should alert you to that. It should be on the work order that the power is off or not off, where the power can be turned off. But one of the things that we may not know is the potential for backfeeding electricity on when people hook generators to their homes and they don't do that appropriately. It backfeeds the line, and so where you think your electricity is off, your house is actually hot. Or phone lines or cable lines or get across and will energize as well coming into the house if they're touching power lines and electrical lines. Look for sharp objects when you're removing debris. Again, nails, glass, broken tin or broken metal, any of those things that can cause you harm in terms of a cut or a nick. Refrigerators and freezers, if the power has been off, do not open them. Just leave them, tape them closed, and take them to the street. Be certain of your assignments. Mistakes by volunteers can make matters worse. So know what you're doing, and don't make things worse. Again, if you're not sure, ask, and if you are uncertain of your skills, then don't, and let someone else do that. When you come to a job site, you're going to fill out what we call a PIF form, a personal information form, and it's going to have medical information on it. And you need to fill that out. You need to complete it thoroughly in case something happens, and then you're going to have to give a point of contact, an emergency emergency contact, and it needs to be witnessed by 2 other people when you come to work on a call out. And it's what's called our hold harmless form. You need to have your own health insurance, and you need to provide adequate, up-to-date medical information. And you will do this every time you respond to a call out, because things change, your medical situation may change, your emergency contact may change, and so each time you come, you will be asked to fill out that PIF form. We must look out for the safety of our workers, and so we want to take care of you. We want to make sure that you are insured and that we have adequate information that we can provide you that necessary assistance in case something happens in an emergency situation while you're on site. Once we are finished, then we pray with the family. During the time we spend helping and sharing with the family, we talk to them, we share with them. We ask them about prayer concerns and prayer needs, and at the completion of the job, we can gather with that family and we can pray with them, and we can pray about those needs, and we can leave them in with some hope and some promise. When we rolled up on the job, their house was destroyed. When we leave, their house is not back where they can move in it, but they're one step closer. They're further down the road of getting their lives back recovered and restored, and it's a great opportunity for us to celebrate with that family that God has allowed us to be there and to do that, and given us the privilege and the opportunity to come and minister to them. And so we want to pray with them, spend time with the family as much as necessary, praying with them and ministering to them, and that helps them in that healing process. And then we present a Bible. Each team member should sign the Bible and leave them a reminder of who was there, what they did, how they were helped by what we did. And we pray with them again as we provide that Bible and give them that hope that they can hold on to. And so our team members have an opportunity to leave a lasting word as they write a message, a favorite scripture in that Bible, and leave that homeowner and that family with something that is unchangeable and can never be destroyed, and that is the precious Word of God. For 3 years, in the last 3 years, Southern Baptist Disaster Relief volunteers, we have averaged 3+ salvations a day. So God uses us in very significant ways. He uses us who are willing to minister, who are willing to serve, and He could use anything that He wanted to do. He wanted to bring about hope and healing and salvation in the lives of people. He chose to use us. He chose to allow us to have the skills and the knowledge and the passion and the sense of urgency when people are hurting and in need. And so God has chosen to use us, and so we need to be prepared to serve. We need to be prepared mentally. We need to be prepared physically. We need to be prepared spiritually when we depart, when we go to work, and when an event has happened, when a hurricane has happened, or a tornado has happened, or a flood, or all three of them combined have happened, and people are hurting and people are in need. We need to be prepared to serve and to be used as the hands and feet of Jesus, to give that cup of cold water, to share that message, to answer that question, why are you here? Why are you here? Be ready to tell them why we're there. And then we're ready to go. We pack up, we go home, we process through the experience, we thank God for the joy of being able to serve, and we prepare for the next one. Because unfortunately, there's always a next one. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope that it has at least helped get you started in preparation and preparing for being a part of Florida Baptist Disaster Relief Ministry, particularly in the area of cleanup and recovery, and being part of a team, and being part of a team that has been called and prepared and equipped to serve and to meet people at the point of their greatest need. So God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you down the road. Thank you.